Hello everyone and welcome to the third video in the input tutorial series. Apologies about the delays, it's been a bit of a hectic month this month, so it took me some time to go back to the series. But without further ado, let's dive into it. So last time we ended up doing the input buffer notify state right here, and we gave it the buffer name of attack1 and the type of instant. Now let's specify the type of input we're gonna add to the buffer itself. Now we're using enhanced input, but it's not really set up yet for the use case of a Greystone. So if you go to the gameplay on Greystone, you'll find a mapping context. Usually all third-person templates have that on the player character. So if you go to the player character, you'll find a mapping context. And if you go to this magnifying glass, it will take you to this mapping. And there's an action folder beside it as well. So let's create a new input action, and if you click here and search for input action, you should find this. I'll call it input action underscore attack. Now for the use of attack, we're gonna keep it this way. Go back to the mapping, add a mapping. We just created a new attack, and let's give it a keyboard of left mouse button. Now, whenever left mouse button is added, let's try here. Now let's create the input action we just did. And let's test it on triggered. For the sake of testing, I'm going to disable this one since it was already created. And let's see this one working or not. Now if I play and click, it's clicking more than once, and that's not what we want. Let's go back to default and let's add a trigger of type tap. That means if I tap the thing, it should print only once, so it trigger only once. As you can see here, every time I click, it prints it only once. It doesn't keep looping it. And if you keep the mouse held, nothing happens. So it has to be tapped and it has to be quickly. So this way we keep the attack as we want. So every one click you do, you're gonna do the attacking. Let's try it with this. It should behave exactly the same as the left mouse button. And that was the breakpoint from last time, don't worry about it. So you already visualized it working, and if you keep clicking, nothing happens. Now, with that in mind, let's keep those here. Let me delete this, let me delete this. And let's start using this attack to go into the next montage for what we had before. So first of all, go back to the attack animation and add the input of attack. And let's create an action to perform, and let's call this, if you don't, you'll see this by default. So if you click here, click on the plus, and the plus, you're gonna have to specify a source. You'll find this by default, all projects have them. So let's give this action a name. So let's call it buffer dot action dot attack 2. That means the second attack. So I'm gonna give it this, and let's save this. And now let's go back here. Now, since I'm running a montage already, and it's already the attacking, now the system, we need to ask the system if it has, if a montage is running, that's first. Second, if there is a buffer active that is actively listening to this one. So let's go back to the buffer component, and in the buffer component, let's get a new function, and we call it search for buffer of input action. So this way we're going to check these buffers, and let's see if any of those buffers that exist, if they exist of course, have an input action that is exactly the same as the one we're going to look for. So let's call this, sorry, let's change this type to input buffer, don't forget this. Sorry, input action. And if it found one, return right away with a true. Return value. This will be true. If it found nothing, just return nothing. So now let me test that, and let's actually test this function to begin with. So if I'm attacking, which in my case I will be, search for buffer of input action, it will be this one. If from the attack itself. If you don't have it and you see it closed like this, just expand it. And let's print the value that we get from the return value and see if there is actually something listening. So in our case, it will start here, it will end here. Don't worry about the types and the buffer name and so on. We don't care about this. We just want to check if the input to record is actually there when we click again. So we can see true until it hits false again, until it hits false and then back to true when I attack for one more time. So in this case, it does work. Now, if it is working, give us the type of the buffer we're looking for. So our type was instant. So if it was instant, we need to execute the action to perform right away. So in this scenario, since we found the action, let's actually return the index altogether. So here we will return, by default, it will be -1. So if you found something, give me the index from the input buffer info. And from there, we can start doing some checks and see what we can do. So if it is true, we can get the buffer info, and here we can do a get, give it the array index, and now we have access to the thing we wanted. Don't worry about how messy this gets. It will get cleaner later. I'm just trying to make you visualize the process. So for now, we do have an action to perform. We can do a switch here. And we can give it values. So in our case, it was attack 2, remember? So in the case of attack 2, and this is what's going to happen now, we're going to play the second montage. So here we were performing primary A. Let's do primary B here. And let's see what happens. So if we play and attack once and then attack again, you could see me switch right away to the second montage, and that's exactly what we wanted. Now we could do the exact same setup to the second primary montage, which is primary B, was it? And let's paste it here. Let's remove the save attack. Let's adjust these values. It's gonna remain, don't worry about the name, or we can actually change it up to you. Attack 2. The action would be attack 3. So for attack 3, which we just added here, it's the exact same setup, no change. And let's give it the primary C we had. And now attacking will reset when primary C at this point gets reached. So at that point we can attack again. So let's try this. Attack 2, 3. However, if I click it crazy, you could see I switched two animations very quickly. And this is where the type would matter. So we don't want the instant in this case. Instance could be useful when you dodge out of a specific montage. So say for example you are attacking and you want to give the player the ability to dodge during the input buffer. So in that case you would use type instant. But in the case of our attacks, it doesn't have to be instant, it has to be delayed. So by delayed, it's whenever the end of the buffer is reached. So this requires a little tweaking to how the input buffer is working right now. So we're gonna have to check if we can execute something by the end of the buffer itself. So rather than just removing it and doing nothing else with that, we can check there and try to execute the buffer itself based on the end of the delayed, if there was an input actually pressed. So let's add some values to the buffer info just to make sure we record if an input was actually pressed. So it was pressed at some point. So let's go back to the struct we created. Where did we put that? What was it called? Input buffer info. Right here. Let's get a new variable and let's give it a value already set. By default, the value will be false. So we don't have to care about that part. Here in the animation, we compile this one and go back to the animation. You're gonna already see it, but make sure not to set this value. Or we can do something else here. We go back to the blueprint. When you do a begin, we can break here just to make sure that whatever you do doesn't somehow by mistake set the value to true. So we can set these values one by one and just skip this one. We don't care about it. So with this out of the way, let's go back to the input buffer and right here, when we are going to remove, sorry, on the end, when we are going to remove, before we remove it, let's do another function that checks and actually executes if something already exists. So in this case, let's go back to the input buffer component and let's do check input buffer info for action. So here we're gonna get this and we're gonna loop. And let's break from this one. And we're gonna check the buffer name and let's make that an input. So the input would be buffer name. If it is, and it's already set, we'll go back to the already set part in a little bit. Just bear with me. And if it is the case, let's return. Give it a return value. True. And if nothing, just return false. Now, let's do the setting part. So let's go do set input. What did we call that one? Let's go back, check input buffer info for buffer name. Sorry, my bad, for buffer name. And let's do here set input for buffer name is set for buffer name. Yeah, this is better. Let's give it a name, buffer name. So here, let's do this. Let's do a for loop again. This is too many loops, I know. If you guys want a video explaining loops more thoroughly, do let me know. Loops are a little intimidating for beginners, so it's good to know how my viewers think of this. So do let me know in the comments if you guys want me to explain loops more thoroughly. So set input is set for buffer. If it is this one, let's do an array index. Promote this to a variable. Local index. Give it a default value of -1. When we are done, we're gonna check if this is not equal to -1. So if it's something like 0 or higher, that means that we found something. If we found something, do this, do a get with the reference, don't make it a copy. And from here, let's link this one and let's do a set members. If you click on it and go on the right side, you'll see already set as a pin, expose it and set it to true. And that's all you have to do. So right now, let's use these functions. Now, what we had here works for a type instant. So you can give it the instant type. However, if it's not instant, we need to check. We actually need to set it. So here in this case, we have to get the buffer component and set. What do you call it? Is set input set input is set for buffer name. So it wasn't instant. The only other option is delayed. And we have the buffer name right here. Let's give it a little bit more space. And let's put this down. And that's it. Now what we need to do is check input buffer info for buffer name. And we're gonna put this in the input buffer itself. So check input buffer for buffer name. The name is the same name as we have here. It's in both functions. If it was true, we need to execute it. So the execution part, hook the false here by the way, don't forget that. The execution part is what we are missing right now. So to do the execution, and this is where things will get a little too confusing, and this is where we have to actually, at the end, we will end up cleaning this part. Because at this point, if you have to do this for every single input that you have, and this switch could actually grow very big. So to clear this up, we need to also do that function, which is execute the action based on the name we just received. So let's call that function execute action based on input, buffer name. So let's give it a name. So here, buffer name. And based on that buffer name, let's do a loop for each. Another break. You guys notice most of those are exactly the same functionality. However, what I'm trying to do is not to shortcut things for you, however, to make you think loud while you are doing the thing, because a lot of the prototyping you do might end up getting fixed all in one or two functions. And you will not have this huge list of things later on. So this is not big. However, if you ever want to add more left mouse button for whatever case scenario that you have, say for example, a case where you have left mouse button for almost every action, attacking while blocking, or attacking after an attack, or doing a special attack and then a regular attack, and so on. So things could go very hectic here. Remember, this is only one input. However, in most games, there is at least 5 or 6 that are related to attacking only. So when it comes to that part, you don't want to be, you don't want to confuse yourself later. So let's do this part. Let's finish it. Execute action based on buffer. So here we have on buffer name. So if you found the buffer name that we're looking for, let's do the let's do a dispatcher here. Let's get a dispatcher on action executed, and the action would be, let's give it an input, has to be, it must get a buffer name and an action or buffer action, which is going to be a gameplay tag. And let's call this, we are going to give it the buffer name we had and the input action. And after this, return. So with this return, now what do we do with this dispatcher we had? We're going to come back here and click on the component, and you're going to see it on the right side. On action executed, it will give you a buffer name. Make a switch in here. So ours was attack 1, if you remember. And then a switch, another switch here. And we had quite a few. Attack 2 and we had attack 3. Let's do both of those. And this is where we get things cleaner. So let me move those down. Don't worry, we're gonna clean things up here. But first, let's go back to the buffer state. And when we did this part, we were checking if it was already set or not. If it was set, let's execute action based on buffer name. After we execute, remove it. So right now, this part is finished. We're not gonna go back to the input buffer anymore because we already have everything we need. Now, based on this, let's go back and redo the, let's actually first, before we redo anything, let's check if this part is actually running when it was set. So I'm gonna remove this for now. Actually, don't remove this, 1 second. Remove this part. And now let me attack. It's not setting it. Why? Because it wasn't set properly. Now, how do we do the setting properly? Now, if you check here, this is charging if there's an input buffer of action. However, we are not setting the is set to true, this function. We're not really calling it. So we have to call this function first. So we had it set right here. However, we will need to actually set it here as well. So it doesn't matter if it's instant or delayed. Let's do them both for the same. And this is mostly what you have to do for the majority of the inputs that you have. So attack will have only this part, and I'll show you how instant and delayed can differ in that scenario. So after you set it, we know it's gonna be, in our case, delayed. So delayed, when it reaches at the end of it, it will try to attack again. See? Now it got called. So right now, the timing is correct. However, you can adjust it too if you like. So this is a bit too much. Let's do it here. And let's do this one here as well. Now let's try. 1, 2. The third one didn't execute. So let's go take a look why. So attack 2, it was called, not attack 1. So let's go back here and another attack. Attack 2. Now both of them do the same thing. So if you do it this way, 1, 2, 3. And this is exactly what we want. However, remember, delayed is not working yet. Sorry, instant is not working yet. Now to make this work, we need to also notify the component that the input we just registered is actually an instant one. So when does it know if it's an instant that was set? Literally after this function, or actually inside it. So whenever it is set to true, we need to check as well, break, if the type is instant. If it is instant, we can do on action execute, and we can give it what we had, and then we can remove it. This ending part is exactly what we had here. You go to the end, execute action based on buffer name, and then remove input action. So here you can, actually rather than doing it this way, let's do it this way. So we have two things that are the same. And now let's try the first one, making it instant. So if I click two very quickly, 2 clicks, this should already do everything we need. See what happened if I clicked twice too quickly? Now this does, this can stack, you can add 2 buffers, but make sure every name is different, otherwise you're not gonna get the results you want. We established this can be instant or it can be delayed. We gave it an input to look out for and an action to perform. So the action to perform, this is your magic function. Checking the name of the buffer that you registered right there, and the action you were trying to do, and which inputs are related to it. So if we searched for one, we found it, set it. If we searched and we found nothing, that means it's not relevant. So you can have any amount of inputs you have here, any types of input actions, like a move, like a block, like a dodge, do the exact same setup here, and you'll get the results that you want. And that wraps everything up for the input buffer. I know this video was very long. However, if you guys want to see more types of these videos, do let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to do them. Thank you everyone for watching and have a good day.